Welcome to Canadian Innovators, the show that celebrates innovation, entrepreneurs, and the Canadian spirit. I'm Jocelyn Bamford, and every week we introduce a new entrepreneur, tell their stories, and unpack the challenges of keeping jobs in Canada and discussing potential solutions for job growth and prosperity. Supply chain is an issue that keeps coming up as a challenge for almost every business in Canada. The lasting effects of COVID, unrest in Asia, the Christmas rush, the fires in BC, and problems in the ports are all putting pressures on manufacturing and business. Joining us today to talk about this is Daniel Pawlick, General Manager of Coppercore, and a man that needs no introduction, post-media columnist Anthony Furey. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm going to start with Dan. Dan, Coppercore is a Canadian-owned and designed manufacturer of heat exchange products. Tell us exactly what a heat exchange product is and what do you use it for?
Okay, thank you, Jocelyn. Essentially and simply put, a heat exchanger is a product that either removes heat or adds heat to a particular process.
So what do we use that in? Give me some industries that might use that in a real-life example.
It's an extremely broad and large industries. It covers a lot of aspects. Starting with, it can be used in buildings for heating and cooling systems. It can be used in consumer products such as refrigerators or even computers that need cooling or heating. Industrial processes, most machineries need to keep cool so they can keep running. Transportation and construction industries, those pieces of equipment need things to cool their engines or to cool their transmissions. Power generation. Power generation within a scope of an industry requires many heat exchangers to keep all their machinery cool, their transformers cool, their bearings cool. So it's a very diverse and a very broad range of products that most people would think about it or not think about it because it's really a subcomponent that works in the background to make sure everything is running at the right temperature.
So tell us, how did you start this business? Give us the story of the genesis of Coppercore.
It's a family business. It was started by my father over 40 years ago. Back in the late 70s, my father had purchased a ready-to-repair and service company, and he wanted to be in business for himself. And it started off as somewhat of a part-time business. Originally, he had a partner, and he had one employee. And when he had purchased the business, ultimately he came home and he was saying, well, we got a family business going here, and you got a summer job. At that time, I was just in high school, and so my summer job throughout school and throughout university was working in the family business. So along the way, it got a little bigger and it grew a little bit. And then when I had finished school, I went on to other endeavors. And then ultimately, I came back into the family business. And then we just decided to make it something bigger.
So tell us about COVID. Everybody faced a challenge with COVID. In about 30 seconds, kind of bring Anthony in because we've got a new topic we're going to discuss about the COVID. So how did you deal with COVID in your company?
COVID was a challenge because we never closed during COVID. That being said, our business was impacted. It was downsized to some degree because our normal original equipment orders were down, but our parts businesses was fairly stable. So there was some disruption there. And then along the way, we had to plan to make sure that all of our people were safe. And so that required, first of all, a lot of management meetings and meetings with our health and safety committee so that we could, put together a plan to keep our people safe. That ultimately involved in, bringing masks into the workplace, changing people's habits and behaviors, which was the biggest challenge, getting them to accept masks, getting them to wash their hands literally as they entered the building. Every time they left the production floor or the office environment, use the washroom, wash their hands. Sanitizing the plant on a regular basis. And also imparting a very big degree of patience with both management and people as individuals, so that as we were trying to change our normal behaviors, did you wipe your feet when you came in the door? Did you wash your hand? Somebody may take longer to pick up that new habit. And so it was reminding people and even individuals reminding each other, but not taking offense to, we got to get there. We put a multi-point plan together, and we felt that we had to release it in stages because it took time for people to absorb it and develop it. And along the way, there was a little bit of concern that we were maybe overdoing it. And I think in the end, everybody thought, wow, we pretty much had a good game plan.
Well, that is a great story of overcoming the challenge. And when we're going to go to break, and when we get back, we're going to talk to Anthony, because Anthony's going to tell us there's potentially going to be a fifth wave. So we're going to be right back. Stay with us on Canadian Innovators. Welcome back. I'm here with Dan Pawlick from Coppercore, and we're going to bring in Anthony Furey. And we were just before the break talking about how we dealt with COVID. And Anthony, you wrote an article about a potential fifth wave and what the public health officials are doing. Like, what is that about? It's enough to drive you screaming into the night.
Yeah, I'm not here to be the person to fearmonger over a prospective fifth wave, but more to perhaps offer some of that nuance and context there. Yes, there is conversation in Ontario in particular and throughout Canada about the prospects of a fifth wave. One thing that's very interesting, though, looking back over the fourth wave, a lot of people would go, well, hold on, did we have a fourth? What happened? And there was a lot of fear-mongering from my colleagues in the press about an expected fourth wave. One particular story I got a chuckle out of, it was published on September 8th, and the person, the medical person who was on the Ontario Science Table predicting a really awful fourth wave that would be driven by pediatric hospitalizations, they claim. That was dated September 8th, as I said, and that proved to actually be the peak of the fourth wave. And then numbers went down immediately after. So I would just maybe humbly suggest that any sort of fifth wave conversation does factor in all of that nuance and context that has shown we're really able to make good progress moving forward. You know, Jocelyn, the vaccine mandate was a bit of a controversial issue in Ontario. Doug Ford was very much against it before he was in support of it. And we heard from a number of business associations, such as the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, who said that the reason they supported a vaccine passport in Ontario was because that would mean that's it. We're done. No more restrictions, no more closures, no more lockdowns. So that was actually the social contract that was made with Ontarians. So when we hear some individuals taking to the airwaves saying maybe there should be more restrictions, I guess I'd encourage them to reflect upon that social contract that we did make, that actually we're not going down that path really ever again.
And talk about the science roundtable. I mean, in business, we're always having to make forecasts, and we're checked on our forecasts to see how we're doing. How is the science roundtable, in your opinion, doing on their forecasts?
Well, they've never done particularly well. They've always been far off the mark in terms of the number of wild expectations that they have made and predictions in terms of cases through the roof and hospitalizations through the roof. But I'll also point out one thing that not a lot of people are aware of is that the Ontario Science Table is not a formal government advisory panel. The head of it, Dr. Steiny Brown, is not, in fact, a medical doctor. He does have a PhD, but he's not a doctor. And this is an ad hoc organization that chose to band together a group of individuals. And at a certain point in time, Ontario did welcome them up to the podium beside them. But they are not a formal government entity at all. So when we hear about whether or not Doug Ford is or is not taking their recommendations, well, we should take all of that with a grain of salt, because there's no formality to what they are.
Well, and again, they impact how we do business. But we're going to pivot now, and we're going to talk a little bit about an issue that I hear all the time as the president of the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Business of Canada, and that is supply chain challenges. So, Dan, let's start with you. Talk to me about the supply chain and how that has impacted your business.
Well, this is probably the most significant issue at this point in time. Because the supply chain is a very big and complicated aspect, particularly for our organization, and I'm sure for many others. We've experienced, very significant increases in our raw material prices. So all of a sudden, our prices have gone up potentially 100%, or even some cases 200%. We've had delivery dates that have now been missed. So our delivery date accuracy from our suppliers has been compromised. Add to that the lead times for us to order products have gone up exponentially. In some cases, we would have 8 weeks lead time, 12-week lead times for some of our significant raw materials. We're now experiencing lead times up to 75 weeks. So we're getting into forecasting our business volumes over 12 months in advance to make sure that we have a continuous supply of raw materials and inventory to do it. So that really escalates the risk, the financial risk, and also, having space to store these materials. And so a lot of times I would venture to say that a lot of CEOs are huddling with their purchasing departments on how much capital are they going to put out in order to make sure that they do have supplies to meet their customers' needs.
And we're certainly going to see that with Christmas coming up. Anthony, we just have about 30 seconds left. You talked about the clash between China and Taiwan and the impact on the supply chain. Why don't we start talking about it? We'll go to break and we'll come back and finish up.
Yeah, well, Taiwan provides a lot of materials, including conductors, to places all around the world, and they consider themselves a very vibrant, free, independent nation, but China considers them a wayward state, and they wish to bring them back into the fold, such as they view Hong Kong and Tibet.
I'm Jocelyn Bamford. You're watching Canadian Innovators. And we're back. Anthony, before we went to break, we're talking about supply issues. Let's pick it up where we left off.
Yeah, I guess one of the challenging things with geopolitical stability and economic stability when it comes to what's going on in China and Taiwan is if you ask many military strategists, I think most, you ask them where would a potential World War III erupt, and they say in the South China Sea in regards to what China is doing in relation to Taiwan. And that is an issue that doesn't just have national security implications, but of course has economic implications because of materials that Taiwan provides for regions all across the world, from things like semiconductors to various other products.
Absolutely. And now we layer on to that what we're going to see coming out of the floods in BC and the problems of getting supply coming from Asia. What do you expect to see right now with the supply chain with those issues?
Well, yeah, a lot of concerns about things that are happening with supply chain in general. It's been a real education to watch those deep dive studies of ports on the West Coast and in California and watching the nitty gritty of why they're having problems getting some of the ships offloaded and getting other products on. And we really see how all of this is exacerbated and compounded with the pandemic, with geopolitics right now, and obviously with various supply and demand issues. And now I think regular Canadians and regular people all around the world are more and more tuned to the supply chain. It's no longer some abstract issue. It's something that is the focus of many regular individuals.
100%, and I think it's something that we absolutely need to address. But you compound the supply issues with the Buy America and now Buy Quebec. So Dan, I'm going to go to you, and I'm going to ask you about how Buy America and Buy Quebec now is going to affect your business.
I think that the Buy Quebec or the Buy America will not likely have any significant impact on our business. If it really was to impact us, we would probably compensate by opening a facility in that jurisdiction, assuming that the economic characteristics would support it. But directly, we don't expect it. I think that, to go along that lines, I don't feel the Buy America, Buy Quebec, or, the entire Buy Local is really the essential solution or topic there. I believe that the Canadian businesses, we can compete in all of these environments. So we don't want to be restricted in our ability to compete to them. What we do want to do is make sure that as we are competing, we can use our own strengths, we can develop our own technologies, and not feel that we are hampered with a hand tied behind our back when we're competing for business. And tying hands behind our back could be, our inputs to our resources, our ability to an educated workforce, to a talented workforce. It could be to our cost inputs, electrical powers, transportation systems. Those things would concern us to make sure that we're on an equal or competitive footing in those areas where the government or larger businesses control some of those feed costs.
Yeah, Canadian business can compete with anybody, but what we don't need is to be hampered with extra carbon tax, extra pricing, clean fuel standards, so that we can't compete. Anthony, what are you seeing as ways to get Canada moving, and what hindrance do you see to Canadian business?
it's interesting that you should bring up the clean fuel standard and other measures. Look, Jocelyn, when I hear what Dan is saying right now, I find it very informative, and to hear from someone who's got so many years experience on the ground. And I think the challenge with senior public servants and with elected officials is they don't have any secret knowledge about these sectors that they do not work in and that they do not have experience in. You know, they increasingly adopt a government knows best attitude, which is very troubling. Of course, you want to go directly to the people in the sectors to ask them about their industry and to really humbly learn from them, as I feel I do whenever I speak to someone who runs a manufacturing facility. But I find like the priorities with government right now are the opposite. They really want to tell people, this is what you must do. And that's not good for those businesses. And I think it will also have distortionary effects on the economy at large.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because we need Canadian politicians to take some advice from Canadian innovators. So after the break, I'm going to give you both the opportunity to tell the politicians what you think and what policies that they could put in to help us get our economy back on track. So think of your thoughts, and we'll come back to it right after the break. I'm Jocelyn Bamford, and you're watching Canadian Innovators. And we're back. I'm Jocelyn Bamford, and my guests are Dan Pawlick from Coppercore and Anthony Furey from Post Media. And I always like to talk to my panel about what policies you would put in place if you're a politician to maintain and grow business in Canada. So, and what do you see for the future? Dan, let's start with you. You're the Prime Minister, you're the Premier. What are you going to do?
I would like to make sure that our businesses have unhindered access to global markets, in the sense that we need to make sure that we have appropriate supplies, and if they're not local, then we can still achieve those supplies, and also to have unhindered access to customers. We want to be able to go and quote on particular jobs or projects in other jurisdictions. Also, for most of us, I think adopting and implementing new technology and equipment is always an ongoing and a very fast-paced environment. So making sure that we're concerned with employment, having people available to hire, having people that are potentially trained or experienced, or at least training programs, liaisons with colleges. One area there that we want to understand is that technology, and in our particular business, the cost of technology via equipment is expensive, and it's fast moving and it's continuous. It's happened over the years. This is our everyday or our every year experience. And to put an analogy to this, if the government thinks the pandemic is fast moving, come visit us. It is continually like that. So those are the challenges, and they need to help us, not get in our way.
And I know you have unique and fast-paced business. So Anthony, now it's your turn. You're the Premier or the Prime Minister. What policies are you going to do to strengthen business and competitiveness in Canada?
Well, two ideas more to sort of signal a tonal shift in how we do things in Canada. I would withdraw from the Asian Investment Infrastructure Bank, which is something China has created to sort of put global finance and economics more in their favor. And in turn, I would support Taiwan's request of Canada that we back them entering the new Pacific trade deal, which China may eventually be a member of as well, to really signal that we want free nations to be in charge of the flow of goods and how we do trade and business together. The other issue that I'd support is really stepping away from government green initiatives that are top-down initiatives and moving more towards an approach that embraces what the Canadian innovators who are trying to herald the green revolution through their own R&D and own industriousness and so forth are doing. Because as I said previously before the break, the government knows best approach I don't think is really necessarily always in sync with the R&D and the progress that businesses are actually doing. So making green issues be much more business-led as opposed to top-down, government-led and NGO-led.
Absolutely, and we've seen Canadian businesses step up through innovation to reduce their global footprint, not only because it's the right thing to do, but it also reduces their cost. I mean, one of the largest costs for manufacturers is energy. So it behooves the manufacturers to do whatever they can to bring in innovation to reduce the cost of that. Dan, I'm going to let you have the last word. We have about 1 minute and 24 seconds. Is there anything else that you'd like to see from policy that would help your business compete globally?
I think I just like to remind our government, both internationally and nationally and provincially, that we've always thought of Canada as a cultural mosaic. But I think we also need to recognize it is somewhat of an economic mosaic. We're a big company or a big country with a relatively small population. And there's districts and areas and provinces that have fundamental different economic needs. So to some degree, we want to move in certain directions, but we cannot, just go and say to people that, we could say it's an Indigenous person. It could be the Indigenous lifestyle or businesses in a given province. Do we want to stop fishing altogether? Do we want to stop mining altogether? Do we want to stop oil and gas altogether? Do we want to stop forestry altogether? One of Canada's natural strengths are these resources. When we talk about being global competitors, we want to take our natural strengths and we want to add to those. We want to add to those, an educated workforce. We want to add to those a technological workforce. And so we want to build on those strengths. If you're going to hamper those, we are going in a direction that we've already taken some of our strengths and undermined them. So economically, I think we need to recognize that provinces have certain strengths and we need to work with them to develop them as well.
Thanks to my distinguished guests, Canada needs a strategy to ensure our supply chain is robust. We need politicians of all levels to realize that a Canadian-made solution is not only good for safety, but also for Canadian prosperity and jobs. Join us next time on Canadian Innovators.